Hey everyone, I'm Lou Perez, your host of the Builder Upper Show, a podcast where we talk about everything in construction and trades. We have a special co-host today, Jennifer Hiers, who will be interviewing women in construction for Women in Construction Week. Hey Jen, how you doing?
Hi Lou, thanks for having me.
Who is your special guest today?
All right, I want to welcome everybody to the Builder Upper Show. I am pleased to have a special guest. We have Demi Knight Clark. And before I go through and ask questions with Demi, we're going to first start off by just, I'll give an introduction of her. So she is a multifaceted professional with a rich background in welding, construction, and most certainly advocacy for women in trades. Her journey encompasses roles such as welder, Yale alumna, nonprofit founder, TEDx speaker, Guinness World Record holder, and an Ironman competitor. She is the founder of She Built the City, an organization that is dedicated to empowering women and girls in construction and maker trades. And then I'll go ahead and just welcome her to the show. And Demi, any gaps you want to fill in with that introduction that I just gave you?
Sure. No, it was great. But just on the She Built the City, I rolled off the board about 3 years ago. And it just because they didn't need my founder's disease, a face being everywhere. And there's an amazing executive director, as well as staff there that has continued on with really terrific work to what we've started. So exactly what I couldn't have dreamed any better, so that I could move more into this welding space and advocacy space and doing all the crazy stuff I do around the world.
Yeah, you have definitely an extensive background. So let's just dig right into kind of first your early influences and your career path. So your grandmother was one of the first female Marines and Rosie the Riveter during World War II. How did her trailblazing spirit influence your decision to pursue a career in welding and construction?
I think it was innate confidence. We hear that so much in women's sports right now, and I believe it is. I did not know that as a Title IX sports player in the 80s, feral Gen Xer that I am. That sounds ancient. But to have that kind of a role model around me, and my father, who was an Army Ranger, that threw me in the workshop alongside my brother and, solder pine wood derby cars for Boy Scouts while my brother's in there. I'm like 5, 6 years old, but really she was so confident, and it just oozed out of her. And to be around that, it's very see it, be it, but then also to have that in your own family. Again, I think now I definitely respect it. Maybe back then I didn't as much as I should have, but it's so important to me in my own daughters. I have 18 and 20-year-old daughters myself, both are in college, and also any kind of women, and even really any kids right now that are in Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they just need tremendous amounts of confidence. But I think we're showing, especially in STEM, that girls need it 10x the boys, because they'll get out of sports at age 14, or they'll get out of STEM at age 13 for a variety of reasons. But really it starts with the lack of confidence or reassurance that they can do this and then they can keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, let's talk about like that journey, right? So, from working in residential home building to founding She Built the City, right? Like what motivated this transition for you?
Well, I'm 48, so self-identifying. Cannot wait till I'm 50 and doing the Molly Shannon. I'm 50 years old, but the older I get, the more I realize, and the more people I talk to, nobody has a linear journey. So I was actually, when I really look back on it and I start tracking the timeline, I loved vocational tech and industrial technology in high school. I was talked out of going into anything further with that. Again, being in the 90s, back then, it was it still is. It's college prep. My own daughters went through it. And that's fine to have as an option, but it really, to me, should be 50-50 these days. But back then it was, hey, you're a really good writer, you should be a journalist. You could be Katie Couric at the time, who's an amazing journalist. But so I went broadcast journalism, went college route, and thought that was just what I was best at from what everyone else was telling me, which now at 48, I know that was one of the things I was good at, but you should go through this journey of a patchwork quilt and put that all together. So honestly, I got out in 99. It was the dot-com boom that busted. I got a tech job and it busted in Washington, D.C. And I said, what's the most stable job I could get? And I went back to what I learned from my grandmother, my father, of just kind of hard work. And I said, home building, let's go. Yeah. There was a position open and I just kept raising my hand once I got it to say, like, I want to run the place. I want to run the place. And again, I think it goes back to that confidence. That lasted through 2017 when I reached a necessary ceiling at the time. I was a regional vice president, one of the youngest in the company that was a female. And I sat with my regional president at my employee review. He said, what's next? And I said, well, clearly your job, meaning I just want to keep going up that ladder. And it was the joke that, hey, I mean, but somebody's going to have to not be here anymore, meaning like possibly pass away because it's a stable job for those four. And I'm happy to say they're all still alive. But yeah, it would have been, 20 years for me to get that job. And it was just a handshake at that point to say, like, it's time to be an alumni. So that's when I went to Yale. I had been raising my kids and sitting in the seat. So I said, I can't for see it, be it reasons before we were calling it see it, be it, get out of this and go to business school or do all the things. So yeah. There, I had a lot of really amazing worldwide global male classmates. Really, it was predominantly male. There were 6 of us. We called ourselves the Yale Team 6 women in the class out of 46. But it was very supportive to where they were all like, so what, now what? You keep talking about this nonprofit, just start it. Like rather than coming up with the excuses. So it was a great ecosystem for that. And they were some of the first ones that wrote the check. I did a pitch in the middle of one of our last classes, thanks to one of our professors, and started She Built the City. And that was 2019. We went into COVID, didn't know what I was doing. Again, found the right people around me that were supposed to be in my life. And we took that journey and then again, rolled off the board so they could be less about me and more about the mission, because I get up on stages and people are like, wow, she's energetic and she does this thing. And again, that's founder's disease. So I always knew that at some point I was going to need to move on from that so they could keep doing very mission critical work. So that put me into workforce development and let me also really dedicate some time into welding and wanting to take from the business school piece of it. You're always solving for something. And so the minute I started welding, I kept hearing like, oh, we need 100 to 400,000 trade workers and everyone's aging out and the trades are dead and all this. And I had heard some of that when I was in the home building side, but it really is true in the manufacturing side. And then I just said, okay, who's solving for this? You keep talking about it, but nobody's doing anything about it. So I did onboard ramps for welding that are workforce development programs that are concentrated 1 week and 4 week programs to get them straight into the seats. And then also reimagined Rosie's, which is a STEM maker camp that our pilot has been funded and will be in June in Hemet, California, where
congratulations
kids that basically welding and the future tense of welding and many of these trade jobs, we got to get you the hand skills of welding, which is so necessary in Gen Z. They actually thrive on using their hands and not these crazy phones all the time. But then also, what does that job look like in 2030 when you get it? You'll be welding for space. We're doing it right now. So our field trip is to NASA. They're going to be working on cobots and robots. And we're not taking away from the hand skills, but we are putting it into their frame set of what does a trade job look like in 2030 to 2040 to 2050, and they could be on Mars. So that's kind of a quick journey, but sorry, that was a long journey.
No, we love the journey. No, it's great to have that background and that context for the questions leading up. And, we're recording this a week prior to Women in Construction Week. And so that is what this recording is ultimately for. And so, let's talk about like women in this construction industry, right? So what are some of the significant challenges you face, if at all any, and then how did you navigate them?
The challenges that I faced were my generation was the onlys, we were, and sometimes that's still the case at welding, but I always gravitate towards those spaces. So I'm probably the weirdo in the room that when I found out it was 3% women in welding, I was like, let's go there. Or, when I was in home building, it literally was it wasn't a conscious choice to say, what are women not doing? It was more of saying like, what's the toughest thing I can do? I mean, that's the Ironman triathlete in me. That's the marathon runner. That's the summit climber. It's just, raising the bar on yourself, right? They call it leveling up now. It's just constantly leveling myself up and saying like, what's the pinnacle? Well, I want to run this place. I want to get into operations. And maybe it was because I was so gender agnostic as a kid and had an older brother. I did not have sisters. I never really saw that until we were really heavily placed into management in our careers in the early 2000s to say, oh, there's a separation here. I wasn't realizing I was the only until people started saying that to me. And then I started saying like, okay, now I need to be cleaner, faster, stronger, better in management. I think it's a little bit less now. Still a lot of the same challenges, still a lot of the same, here we are in a very interesting climate of like, oh, is it back to being merit-based? Or are we equitable? Well, I'm not against merit-based. I think any woman will tell you, of course, it should be the best person for the job. And I'm it, by the way, because I'm going to work the hardest to get it. But if you couldn't get in the room to begin with, that's the struggle. And so that's what I'm consistently telling to men in most industries. I talk to men more often than not right now. And that's why I try to see all lenses. Maybe that's the mature me. Whereas I used to be a fighter in my 20s to be like, nah, we're going to go get this. Now it's just like, okay, let's unpack that. Tell me more about what you think the challenge is if you're the majority. And if there's 97% men in the C-suite in an industry like welding, I want to unpack it and say like, what do you see here? Do you see any inequity or what's the challenge? And so that's why with Reimagined Rosie's, what I was hearing more of was, I'm not trying to not hire women, Demi. I just, where do I find these unicorns? And it's, hey, you need a robust recruiting pipeline any way you're slicing it. I mean, we're losing people, but you also just happen to have less women. And there's so many out there that do better on recruiting everyone. But oh, by the way, by nature of doing great cultures and doing great recruiting in the places that you're not right now, you will have women come with them and a hospitable work environment. But really, it was more unpacking. And I do more unpacking with men right now who are in the C-suite, who are in those leadership positions of saying, where are you hiring? And if it's in a construction management program that has one woman in it, 29 out of 30 students are male, then you're hiring what you're seeing. So just get out and, sponsor women's sports, get involved into high school sports that women are in. I mean, we couldn't be in a better era to get into women's sports at an affordable level. Go where the women are. So, and that's in a less defensive stance, right? Because I think most men are in the space to say, I'm an ally, or it's Women in Construction Week and they support it, but it's like, I don't want to do anything wrong. Like, you have to have safe spaces for these guys to be able to say, like, can you unpack this with me? Because I'm supposed to be in this position where everybody thinks I know what I'm doing. I'm paid CEO level salaries or C-suite salaries. I can't sit here and raise my hand and say, I don't know what to do. Right. So you just have to see it from different lenses. And that's kind of where my space is to see on these women's behalf, less about what are the challenges and really see it of like, how can we communicate better with the people who can make change happen?
Sure. And when you unpack this with then the men and what you're hearing of what they're saying, what advice then would you give to women and to girls who are really hesitant to enter the male dominated fields like welding and construction?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And it's not easy. It's not a like one-step answer. I would say it's super multi-layered. There's subsets in every piece of the industry, from manufacturing to construction to engineering and architecture. Everything's got its own kind of unique ecosystems. I'd say welding specifically. What I say to the men, they start like this, right? Because it's just uncomfortable. It's really tough to talk about. And then their shoulders go away from their ears. And if I can get that to happen, that means they're malleable and interested. Like, oh, this isn't so hard. Maybe we should do this. And the second thing I tell them, if they're open to hearing it, which most of the time they are, I really haven't had anybody be like, yeah, okay, we're good, is just get more people around you. Because I did have that in an interview where a guy that's in manufacturing that is a CEO has a mid-range shop in the Midwest. He was like, hey, I'm going out there and I'm trying to convince these women to come work for me. So I'm doing my best. But how do I just grab them and get them in? And it's like, well, women don't get convinced. Like, you're not going to get a woman to come into a welding shop just because it's like, hey, I need more women in here. It's more of, what is the culture like what we were talking about? Is it a hospitable work environment, or is it going to be tough for her? Is she the only, is there more? But then also, rather than just like trying to throw a job at her, why don't you think about saying, just come visit and tell me what you see and what would make you not work here. right? So that's kind of from the male perspective, is saying, like, rather than saying, I got to go fix this, like most guys, my husband included,
Yeah.
just try to unpack it, right? Or get women in a room and just be the whiteboard person. You take notes and let them talk, and you be quiet in the corner. I struggle to do that with my own children, but like, just be quiet, shut up and listen. And then for the women, that's a little tougher because, again, they are navigating ecosystems that are already challenging. It's hard to speak up. You want to be the one that's the good little toaster that's doing the work, and you're doing merit-based work that should be recognized. But we've already seen that men are typically promoted on their potential, whereas women are promoted on their proof, what they've done in the past. So I say to women is find those sponsors. It's not a mentor, it's a sponsor. It is someone who, not sponsor in the advertising sense. I found them in welding and deliberately found them. And that's a lot of what, kind of my Yale experience taught me was you go find the people that can get you in the room. I don't care what you have to do it. That might actually mean not being in your company anymore. I don't want anybody to quit, but really if that means going outside to another company or go on LinkedIn and find those people, someone who's going to advocate for you to be speaking on your behalf. They know you, they believe in you, and a mentor is on the job training, but a sponsor makes the difference. And I really say find male sponsors. Women are always going to support each other. Otherwise, they're just like, come on, like, what's wrong with you? There's only a few of us in the business. Like, don't be that way. We usually are going to be the ones like, yeah, I got your back. If I'm going to get you in a room, it's happening. But it's super important to get those men that are more and more. And I'm trying to get the light bulbs to turn on, and guys that, like, the easiest thing you could do is be a sponsor. But for the women, that's the best way you can take control, is to go find some men and say, hey, can I ask you to do this? But this is what it requires of you. Are you good with this? And if they need checklists or anything like that, or how to navigate that, find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk to women, because the more we can have doing that, the more we will have being represented in these C-suites, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see it in the company that I'm with, Lumber, our co-founder, Sarisha, and he's just building up women. She builds nation of what Lumber has. So
huge.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Important. And I don't even think they realize it necessarily until it's not like it's immediate, but you see the culture shift over the course of about 12 to 18 months. And then it's just like everyone else sees it and says, what are you doing? It's just, and it's the cool part is if it's organic like that, there's nothing, you don't have to go stand on a panel and talk about it as a case study. People just get it, right? So that's what we want, is that organic sponsorship, to where men don't have to kind of take a class on it. It just is innate, and they're doing it as girl dads or boy dads or not being a dad, whatever it is. It's in their personality moving forward, because I don't think that's innate. I think it is for people that are in a marginalized population, or women especially, because we've always had to think about it. Whereas men, and this is just a statement of fact, it's not emotional weight to it, is just saying, if you haven't had to think about it, it's kind of a wake-up call when someone's telling you about it, So I try to, again, in a neutral way, see it from that perspective. It's like, well, let me awaken you, like enlighten you to this, and feel like you've got control over the situation too.
Yeah. And I love how you said, not just the mentor piece of it, but get yourself a sponsor, because that is a difference. That could be a difference.
Best thing you can do. I'm telling you, it's free. I mean, it's time value of money, right? Of like, someone's time is precious. So that's how I say, be intentional. Don't try to go get 10, don't try to go like get an organization of people. Be very mindful and intentional of who you want, do your research, and then go do the ask. And if they are a great guy, and understanding what the need is here, they're going to say yes. They're going to say yes.
Yeah. No, that's great. Let's shift and talk about innovations and future outlook of our industry. Okay. So, with the integration of technology and trades, really, how do you see the future landscape of like welding and construction evolving?
If there is not instruction and automation in CTE schools, and really, I'm looking hyper focused on the 12 to 16-year-olds right now. I know some, like Navy and submarines. I just posted that on Instagram. It was on the CBS Evening News. They are going into elementary schools and teaching them about automation and how that will be in shipbuilding by the time they are hiring in 2035. Those fifth graders, the younger we can get to them, the better. We have forgotten that population, because we got so, with CHIPS Act and everything else, we got so focused on butts and seats, get the jobs, immediate jobs, again, like very dramatic numbers, 400,000 workers needed by blank, blank, blank. And it was like, wait, how are you dividing that by industry? And is that real? Or is that more of a, it could happen depending on when people retire? Or do we need to, again, focus on building a robust recruiting pipeline, just like every other industry, of saying, well, what are our 15-year-olds doing? Right now, there's after school STEM programs going to tech. There is a robust pipeline of STEM pipelining into tech post-college, which they are pushing college readiness. Whereas CTE, they're starting to do it in a lot of the spots, but it's not anywhere near what it could be in terms of making really welding and manufacturing trades and HVAC, plumbing, electrical, ones you could say are STEM. It's a big part of my movement too, is to say, I don't know, welding specifically, the chasm was created in 99 when we had the .com boom. It really turned into a Google society of Python coding, and that was what STEM was, and away from industrial technology. So now the pendulum's swinging back of skilled trades are necessary. There's a lot of layoffs. I mean, it's ebb and flow. Tech is going to be here forever. So now it's, hey, if you want to make it cool to the 16-year-old who has the phone and has lived in a digitally native world, what are you going to do for them to say, what is technology going to be for them? And oh, by the way, their career trajectory is so accelerated. There is no advanced school they need. I know somebody that's at Steel Fab in Charlotte working on a Fanuc robot that's, I think, a $10 million piece of equipment that came out of their welding school at 23. It's a woman.
Wow. She
didn't have to become a welding engineer and go through 6 years of training and become a stamped engineer. She could. So I don't want to take away from the engineering population, but those kind of trajectories are real, and we just don't advertise them. And we're not exposing, number one, the true trades to these kids. And then number two is telling them the technology base of what those true trades are, rather than saying you're a plumber. Well, a plumber is going to be using AI to do a lot of their work come 2-3 years from now, if they're not already, with project managers, right? And welding, they'll be handheld laser welding, using cobots and robots, and that's to supplement the work. So it's just, I think it goes hand in hand, and then I'll be quiet with, in welding especially, they are very fearful in technology in many regards of saying what's going to take the job. When I've been on the other side of this to see, like, hey, there's always going to be the need for X, but Y is going to supplement it to make everybody more efficient. So stop being afraid of the technology that's coming. A 4-year-old could handheld laser weld. We don't want that for safety reasons, but imagine that with 12 to 16-year-olds when we can expose them to it, and then they're going to be working at NASA.
Right. Exactly. And we talked about, women getting into being in the, construction industry. Let's talk about, how are we appealing to diverse populations as well? Are you seeing that out there?
I think folks are doing better. I mean, again, we're in a climate where it's going to remains to be seen on the federal level what that looks like. But in terms of corporations, they always have the power. And I think I see more and more they're focusing on the hospitable work environment. And then also, if it's the recruiting population, it's a focus on saying, hey, we need everyone. And so that includes, how do we lift up women? How do we lift up the Latinx generation that is to come, whether that's any of the genders, people of color, whatever you're not seeing on our population, the ones that are doing it well are seeing the business ramifications when they do. So if you really need to see the business case study, great. It's being shown. So it's not like is this a good idea, with a head scratch? It's yes, there are absolute case studies behind it. So the smart companies that are winning are absolutely doing it. And the thing that I think that is the safest to say is, in our industry, rather than having to make it about one population, we just have so much opportunity that you have to do better about getting it further out there to the populations that weren't seeing it before, and telling them the opportunity and the shortened career trajectory to management or to technology advancement, or getting you to the moon or Mars, or, the things that could be very sexy comparative to other industries that say, hey, it's going to be a desk job for 30 years. That's what we need to do better on. And I think that will catch more populations if you have a broader net and a broader reach and a better message.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I agree with you. I want to talk about some of those personal achievements you and I quickly did before we started recording this podcast. But you've achieved remarkable feats, completing Ironmans, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, holding a Guinness World Record. How have these experiences really shaped your approach to challenges in your professional life?
I think it's the same. My speaker bureau, they're so funny. When they first started with me, they're like, how do we write your bio? I was like, I don't really know. I'm up for suggestions on that. Just like LinkedIn, people are like, what are you doing now? And I think that's a placing thing for a lot of people. And so again, I try to take that neutrally of, it's nothing personal that I should take from that. It's more of saying, I'm doing things that in many cases, they scare me. I'm always choosing something that it's like, what? I'm not going to be here at some point. So I don't want to get into the whole bucket list thing. It's more about saying like, am I doing everything that I have had a whisper in my ear that hits my vision board to do? And it takes me to some really crazy places, but I wrote the Killy one about 10 years ago and I didn't know why. And most of the time I don't know why. I just write it down. It's like I had a whisper, whether that's divine intervention or universe talking or however you want to kind of read those tea leaves. Those are most of the things. And I'm somebody that's type A, and I get it rightly from an Army Ranger dad of just saying like, you're constantly bar raising, not to burnout, but it's more of saying, how can I challenge myself? Because that keeps me engaged when tough stuff happens. When you get setbacks or it's like, hey, you know what? That grant isn't received for that camp. It's like, well, maybe it's not this time for it. I'm not going to lose the fire for that if I have conviction for it. But I'm going to go do this thing and that's going to keep my fire lit. So I think that's where it comes from. Is it's not to have a list of accomplishments. It's kind of fun to read them back, but I feel like I haven't even done, a quarter of the things that I want to do. Somebody said to me the other day, they were like, your grandmother was one of the first Rosies. What if you were one of the first Rosies in space? And I was like, I'm 48 years old. Like, how would I go to space? And they're like, do you see how many flights are starting and going? Like, just put it on your vision board. And they said that was soul told, which I thought was the coolest thing I've ever heard. Like if your soul is telling you to do something, and who knows, maybe that's next is first Rosie in space. So there has never been a welder in space. So there you go.
Yeah. It's like, put that right on there. Absolutely.
Right. And we'll see where it goes. I said it here
first. I know exactly. And then I will want a second interview with you as soon as you come back.
Yeah, so. Let's do
it. I love it. So let's just wrap it up with one last question. I talked earlier on your journey of, how you got to where you are today. So then let's now reflect on that. What are you most proud of? What are your aspirations also for future of women in trades?
I think there's a couple things that I'm most proud of at this point right now. One is having two daughters that at this point they're college. So it's this interesting shift from being a true parent, high school, you're running around, you're doing all the stuff, like who's forgetting stuff and a dentist appointment and all the things, even though they're teenagers, they still, you're still kind of hovering. Now that they're both here, I'm a coach now. And you have to watch them fail, and say like, you didn't do that, but hey, that's on you. I mean, financial ramifications are to me for paying for college and things like that. They're never going to be off that hook really. But so that's been an interesting transition. But my oldest daughter came to me at Christmas and she was like, Mom, thanks for raising two really stable, well-adjusted adults. And I was like, Maisie, that is the oddest yet best compliment as a parent I think I've ever received, especially with this generation where, it's just all over the place with them in terms of how they're being judged. And I tried to do that as a parent is listen well. But always be judging myself of like, am I around enough? I travel a lot, am I a good mom, especially, which the mom guilt is real. So I'd say that is one of the proudest to date being a parent. And then the other is with Rosie's Reimagined. I really have tried to honor my grandmother and that generation of women. I mean, the 15 million women that literally took a lunch pail and overalls and walked out of their houses for several years during the war. For very dangerous jobs. And then just whatever the job was, they took it. So, I mean, I think that's a true American spirit. So to be able to kind of circle back when I thought about it for years of like, how do I go into this? Like, do I become a welder? What do I do? I think it's all in 2025 slicing up with our camps and making that be future tense of STEM. And then also engaging with the space agencies that I am and saying like, this can make it even cooler to this next generation. She would just be, I mean, pardon the pun, but she'd be over the moon. So I think that would be the other thing is being able to honor her the right way, rather than just saying like, she was pretty cool, right? It's really taking that legacy forward and a thread through into this generation of all kids, not just girls.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Where can someone find out more information about you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. A couple places. I'm huge on LinkedIn, meaning like I'm a high user. So find me on LinkedIn at Demi Knight Clark. I'm always happy to start a chat there. You can find me on my website and even book time with me. If you're curious, I have little 15-minute sessions that I love having conversations with people that start like this and sometimes end up in business, and end up in me going to a high school and talking to them about welding or other things. So I think community is important right now. So it's DemiKnightClark.com. And if you're for a good time, I always say I'm great on Instagram at Girl Fridays Garage.
I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much. And then also for our listeners, we do have a survey. You can find that in the link. Just ask you fill out that survey, and it just helps us moving forward. So with that, again, thank you so much for joining the Builder Upper Show. And again, we're doing this for Women in Construction Week, which is the first week of March. So coming right up. So, all right, Demi, any last words?
No, I'd say happy Women in Construction Week. Let's make it all year. And thanks for listening. And thanks for having a great podcast and doing what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Demi.
If you're a construction contractor and would like to appear as a guest on our podcast, write us an email. It's lou@lumberfy.com.